Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. My name is Kim Cafino, and I'm here to help you coach better. After decades as a teacher and coach in international schools, I founded my company, Eduro Learning, to help you recognize and leverage your influential leadership so you can move from feeling like just a teacher to a confident leader in your school community, however that looks for you. I work with clients around the world through our certificate programs and private mentoring packages, and today's episode highlights so many different ways that you can leverage your influential leadership as a coach or an aspiring leader. If you have a topic you'd like to hear us talk about or a guest you'd like to see on the podcast, please leave a comment below, join our Coach Better Facebook group, or find us on social media at Eduro Learning and send me a DM. Today, I'm chatting with Kawai Lai. Kawai's work focuses on helping teams and leaders rethink culture, strategy, and leadership using the power of visuals. She has worked in both corporate and educational environments, and she shares so many unique and insightful strategies today to help teams and leaders take action and find purpose in creating a more equitable world. This spotlight focuses on using visual facilitation to prompt courageous conversations and how coaches and leaders can use this practice to lead engaging professional learning. In the full-length podcast episode, we also talk about what it means to be a leader today, how we can create responsive teams and find comfort with ambiguity as a leader, and how polarity management can help us manage organizational challenges. If you're learning to leverage your influential leadership as a coach or moving into a formal leadership position, this conversation is full of inspiration to get you thinking. To listen to the full episode, subscribe to Coach Better wherever you get your podcasts. Are you ready to take the leap into leadership but not sure how to get started? Need the confidence to take the next step in your career? Do you want to be inspired by over 70 successful female leaders from schools around the world? Join us for the next global cohort of Women Who Lead. Women Who Lead will empower you to recognize and articulate your leadership potential so you can overcome the many challenges faced by women seeking leadership positions in the field of education. You'll learn with aspiring and growing leaders inside our connected, collaborative, and community-driven annual global cohort. Now is your chance to level up your leadership and reach for your dream job. Our global cohorts open only once a year. Get all the details at edurolearning.com/women. So how do you use visuals and visual facilitation to facilitate these kinds of courageous conversations? And maybe even how could others who don't feel that kind of strength in art and visuals bring some of those strategies into their work?
Yeah. So one of the things that I always point out is how we like our mindsets about art and drawing and visuals, right? We don't like my son is 8, and when he started learning to read, and when he was like 5, right, 4 or 5, I didn't just put a stack of books in front of him and go, okay, let me see if Miles is a good reader and watch him struggle and then be like, oh, he's a bad reader, and then like never teach him, right? But that's our culture around drawing. We're like, oh, this child is an artist. They're gifted, and then like unlike reading, we just leave it, right? Reading, we teach the alphabet, we teach sentence structure, we teach meaning comprehension. We actually get kids to practice reading every day, right? But drawing, imagine if we spent the same amount of time in our education system on drawing and using drawing, just like like my son, he was learning to read, now he's reading to learn, right? What if you are learning to draw and then drawing to understand, right? Drawing to think, drawing to learn, right? It's the same thing. So, there is like a visual alphabet. There are, visual, strengthen your visual vocabulary, right? These are things, and there's so many videos, so many, I mean, like, we live in 2022, 23, like there's things out there you could just Google and find, right? Maybe it would be helpful for me to also share like so, while I've never really had formal art training or any of that. And if you see my doodles or my drawings, like, you know, like they're more conceptual things, right? But my first kind of, I think, foot into the visual thinking world was when I saw, I don't know if you've gone to conferences and you see like the graphic recorder, graphic facilitator who's like drawing out, right, the conversation on the wall. And I first thought like, oh my God, that's amazing. What a cool experience, right? And then I kind of Googled some of the top, graphic recorders and copied some of the things. They have tons of people have lessons on like, if you want to draw this, like, or like, um, or here's how you draw banners, or like tips, like put a frame around your drawing to make it look better, like, so I did a little bit of that, right? And that gave me some more confidence in drawing. But then I realized, I realized, but I also had the fortune, I'll tell you a side story, but then I realized like drawing is not it, like graphic recorders, the work they do is amazing. And it's also an art piece, right? But drawing is not only art, drawing is a thinking tool. It's a processing tool for many people. It's an expression tool, right? It's just like words, right? And by the way, I'm not against words. I'm like the combination of them is what I am promoting. Okay. I don't want people to leave thinking Kawai is anti-words. I'm not. But really, to me, bringing visuals in, whether it's conversations about race, about power, about difference, right? Or bringing visuals in to have a conversation about your vision as a school, or even bringing visuals in to talk about, make sense of like your team dynamics, right? Or make sense of what's happening, right? Visuals give you more clarity. It's visuals, but the combination of words, right? Both of them give you more clarity. They they give you a tool, I think, for vulnerability, especially in conversations that we're uncomfortable or that might feel courageous to us because we're not well versed in having those conversations, right? Um, to me, bringing visuals in is it's just such a freeing way to allow for, again, going back to everybody bring their full selves, right? Allowing for people to express themselves differently, right? Um, one of the things I intentionally did, and this started about 5 years ago, was created a full day seminar course, if you will, on bringing visuals specifically into diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, just whatever acronym or word you want to use it. I call it the work, right? Bringing visuals into the work because oftentimes, I mean, talk about the need for a tool that allows you to be vulnerable, like allows us to make connections, right? So really making an effort bringing that in and creating this toolkit and this course on it. And through that and having, gosh, we probably have had 1,000 educators go through that course now, in the last 5 years. And when I think about it, I now have like this network of people who who want to practice being more visual, right? And something so important that ultimately impacts kind of, I mean, going back to feelings and how students feel when they go to school, how adults in the building feel when they're at school, right? So I'll stop there.
So I want to paraphrase a little bit because I want to see if I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying. Like I said, for me, I'm very linear. Writing is an easy
Yeah.
form. Talking is an easy form. Drawing is more challenging for me. And I know that I can grow those skills. Love the connection to learning to read and then reading to learn, the same with drawing. So what you're talking about is in a conversation that may be very complex for whatever reason, having not only words, but visuals to help us recognize what we're saying, what that means, how it connects, how it intersects, maybe how it cancels something out, helps us have a deeper conversation because it takes a complex idea and represents it visually.
Yes. So I want to show you something. This is
Please.
something I have like literally on my monitor at all times. And it is like 5 or 6 shapes that I
Yep.
have that these are and this is what I mean by visual. I don't mean it's like it's not even I was like gonna say Pictionary, not Picasso, but it's not even Pictionary. It's like oftentimes people when they go through the training that I have, I mean we do talk about like drawing more complex things, but I had somebody ask like, well, why isn't this just a graphic organizer? And I'm like, yes, it's a
Yes.
visual representation of your ideas, right? So I'll give you a really concrete example. A lot of schools, 2016, Black Lives Matter movement, right? 2020, George Floyd. I had never found myself so much in need from schools to serve on committees. I found myself on 5 different DEI committees, whether it was a parent committee, a board committee, facilitating, kind of like leadership committees on it, right? And what I thought was really interesting was on every single one of these committees, um, I, in hindsight, if I could go back, I would have had us just in the very first committee meeting just to stop and say, what do we mean by DEI or B? Whatever it is, like you're talking about, what do we mean by it? Right. And I wish I cycled through some of these visuals, right? One of them is a pyramid with lines, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like is DEI, is this what DEI means to you? Is maybe the bottom is a foundation and it's like higher order that you go, the higher up you go, right? Is diversity like the foundation? Like, do you feel like you need diversity in order to have inclusion and then ultimately equity? Is that what it is? Or is it a Venn diagram? Are they equal, right? Is it equity, inclusion, diversity? Are they all equal? And then at the center, is it belonging? Right? Or is it a concentric circle, with one circle inside another? And to me, it's kind of like more the concentric circle with equity at the center, right? I love the Derica Blackman quote. Derica Blackman, she was Stanford Dean of DEI, and now she has her own practice. Derica Blackman says, diversity is a fact, right? I would put that on the outermost circle. If I were to draw 3 circles, one inside each other, diversity is a fact. It's on the outside. You can see it, right? It's either you're diverse or you're not, right? Inclusion is a practice, which is the next circle in, right? If inclusion is the practice, equity is the goal. I mean, you're drawing a target, right? Equity is the goal at the center, right? So is that what DEI means? And having that level of understanding with just simple visuals and a simple exercise, right? And helping people, and you don't, and sometimes I talk about visuals like vegetables. I'm like, sometimes if you tell people they're about to eat vegetables, they don't want to eat that. They're like, oh, I can't even touch it, right? But sometimes, so same with visuals. Sometimes you're like, okay, I'm going to bring out a visual for you. They're going to be like, well, we don't need a visual. Just, so don't tell them, just bring it out. Right. And when you hear people keep saying like, oh, well, the top of the pyramid or, oh, the center circle, right. Then, the visual is working. Right. But I wish in these committees, I had this visual to be like, hey, is this what we mean by DEI? Because if it is, then we need to stop just talking about diversity, right? Or if it is, like if you think it's a Venn diagram, then we need to talk more about equity as well, right? And then we can have a whole nother visual to unpack what equity means.
Thank you so much for going through that. I was thinking a little bit more. When you were talking about conference, you had in graphic recorders. It immediately brought me
Yeah.
to this company, RSA Animate. I don't know if you're familiar with them,
Mm-hmm.
but they were back in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
day when you were talking about them. They were one of the first
Yeah.
ones to do those. And
Yes.
in my mind, I was like, oh, so it's almost like that concept of like note taking and creating visual notes, but that's not at all what, I mean, maybe that's part of what you're talking about, but what you're really
That's one
talking about.
version of it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I love this idea of like just taking out the visual and helping us understand what we mean through visuals. It's different than note taking. It's, yeah, helping us understand. So
Yeah.
that is
Well,
super powerful.
yeah. And for me, it's both of those and more, right? It's like, how do visuals help you have better, deeper understanding? It may be putting it into a framework, if you will, right? Like these concentric circles and pyramids and stuff, or it might be drawing it out, right? Like if I told you to draw base, right? If I wrote the word BASS and told you to draw it, is it bass? Is it bass? Like, would you draw a fish? Would you draw music? What would you draw, right? And so like to me, again, words and visuals, the combination of those two. And also the best teachers in the world are visual communicators, verbal communicators, and written and are good at written communication, right? It's that triangle. The best teachers in the world have all three of those.
Yes. So appreciate that. And the concreteness, again, this is something that people could take away and use tomorrow and really understand what this means and have a conversation with more. What I see there is more ways to access the depth of conversation that we're having. Like if we're some of the words that you were talking about, some of the words that I talk about, like even just the word coach, obviously this podcast is primarily for coaches. Just the word coach means a million different things to people because we've all grown up with a variety of coaches. So when you talk about coaching, having a visual to understand what that is, the same exact way you went through with diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, belonging, like that makes so much sense. You could use it for any concept that is big and people would have very different understandings of what it means to help kind of get people on the same page. So it's almost a tool for that. The way that you describe that piece of it is a tool for coming to consensus, which for agreement.
Yeah. For deeper understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful. Thanks for watching this video clip with Kawai. As with all of our Coach Better podcast conversations, it was so hard for me to choose just one spotlight to share here on YouTube. This particular episode is full of so many different themes that I highly recommend you head over to the full-length podcast to hear the full conversation. One thing I particularly loved about this conversation is that we were able to highlight so many different facets of both informal and formal leadership, all of which give you great insight into the kinds of conversations you'll have in the Women Who Lead Global cohort. If now is the time for you to embrace your leadership potential and start working towards a formal leadership position, I hope you'll join us for the next global cohort of Women Who Lead. Our graduates consistently tell us that women who lead help them see themselves as leaders, even when they didn't feel that way before they joined the cohort. Hearing the stories and experiences of over 70 successful women in schools around the world allows you to see exactly what it's like pursuing a leadership pathway. You'll recognize the qualities you already have that will make you a great leader and exactly where you need to grow. Plus, you'll build your personal learning network of growing and aspiring leaders in our connected, collaborative, and community-driven global cohorts. Now is your chance to start to see yourself as a leader in whatever capacity feels right for you. Our global cohorts open only once a year. Head over to edurolearning.com/women to get all the details. If you're curious right now and you have questions, please reach out. You can leave a comment below here on YouTube. You can join our Coach Better Facebook group, or you can find me on social media at Eduro Learning and send me a DM. I would love to chat with you about your leadership potential and to see how we can support you. See you next time.